Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today. Today you are you've already made a great decision. You've taken the first step to becoming a homeowner in Portugal. So if you turned your, sorry, I've got, there are a few things that often cause you to halt your plans when you're buying property in Portugal. So if you really want to turn your dreams into a reality, you might be thinking you find the currency markets intimidating, you don't know who to trust, and you aren't sure on the legalities of buying property in Portugal. If that's so, if those are sounding familiar, you have come to the right place. Welcome to Your Overseas Home. My name is Roseanne Bradley, and I'm your host for today's session. Meet the 3 experts you need to buy property in Portugal. Today we're joined by Michael Lucas from Smart Currency Exchange, Chris Martin, the CEO of Ideal Homes Portugal, and Joanna Mistra, a lawyer at Matlaw. Before we get started, I would like to invite you to the Your Overseas Home virtual event, which is coming up on the 16th of March. It's the place to connect with trusted services just like Matlaw, Your Overseas Home, Smart Currency, Ideal Homes. We'll have visa specialists, removal companies, basically everyone you need to connect with. So Patty is going to share buttons if you wanted to sign up. And before we get started, this is largely going to follow a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, do drop them in the questions chat, and we'll get to them at the end. So let's start with Joanna. What things should you consider when buying a new home in Portugal?
Hi, Rosie. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in this afternoon. As Rosie said, I'm a Portuguese lawyer. I'm a managing partner at Matlaw. It's a law firm based in the Algarve and in Lisbon. So we cover the whole territory. And that is the $1 million question, Rosie. What should you consider when doing a property purchase in Portugal? There is no by the book process, so no rule, no special magician trick to tell you this is how it will be, everything will go right. Every process, every purchase is a process. So it really depends on the goals, the timelines, the funding of our clients who will be buying. And our role is to make sure they don't commit they don't fall into any pitfall, they don't commit any mistakes that will lead to a significant damage later on, whether financial or personal. For example, they cannot get a visa because they didn't have the accommodation ready. So in summary, I will try to summarize. It's really important to have proper legal due diligence, proper technical due diligence, good contracts, and detailed negotiation according to these objectives and goals that I was mentioning. And then link all this to make sure you have a signing and a closing that will meet the client's expectations and will lead to a secure transaction. Okay, so 1, 2 or 3 aspects important. Currency, you are in euro countries, so you need to think about that early in advance and discuss with your lawyers and with your FX agents, and I will then pass to Michael. Timelines, if you are planning to relocate, you need the visas, you need to take care of that well in advance before your purchase or you move permanently here. And one of the things important to apply for a visa is an accommodation. So if you want to buy or to let, you need to start looking well before and have good real estate agents to assist you. Funding, if you are selling a property in the UK or wherever you are, to then fund a purchase in Portugal, the vendor doesn't care. It's up to you to sell your property. So all these implications will be super important when thinking about purchasing here in Portugal.
Okay, fab. Thank you, Anna. Chris White, apologies, I did call you Chris Martin. I was literally reading about Maroon 5 earlier. bit of a fun here, so apologies about that. You want to introduce yourself and Ideal Homes?
Perfect. So good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Chris White. I'm originally from the UK, lived in Portugal for about 16 years, been selling international property for about 20 years. It's my 20-year anniversary. I started kind of young. And I've lived in 13 different countries, settled in Portugal because it's a safe, beautiful place. The Portuguese are real friendly. And one of my downsides is I struggle with the language. So and that's one of the reasons I settled in Portugal. Brought up a beautiful family there. Lived in the Algarve for all that time. Travelled extensively. And I've purchased a lot of property there myself. I've helped more than, I would say, 5,000 people buy properties there, some of them for relocation. And my business is made up, or my companies are made up of a rentals company. We manage over 100 million in properties across the Algarve. We've got 75 staff that are amazing people ready to look after you. So we do the rentals. We do the finance for you as well. So we've got a banking license from the Portuguese government, which was really hard to get. And we've had that for 10 years. We've been doing finance. So we can arrange mortgages. We work very closely with smart currency exchange. So we can help with that. Furniture, rentals, relocation. We offer a full VIP tour, which is based a little bit loosely on one of the TV shows that you've seen. And we fly you into Portugal, show you around the full Algarve. So that's kind of a round robin about the company, something I'm very proud of. And we've got an amazing team of people to look after.
No, that sounds great. Thank you, Chris. And whereabouts are you based where is Ideal Homes based?
So we've got 3 offices. So we are, the newest office is in Portugal. The oldest office we've been there for 11 years, and that's in Vila Sol. And one of my business partners opened that. He's off Dragon's Den. So he's called Duncan Valentine. So he came along, snipped the ribbon about 11 years ago. So
wow.
We've got an office there.
Yeah, definitely a name a lot of people will recognise. A similar question, Joanna. Whereabouts are Matlaw based? You're still on mute, babe.
Sorry, I was muted, so I dropped Chris. So Matlaw is based both in Lisbon, the capital, and in the Algarve. We also have clients investing in the north, and usually it's our team from the Lisbon office that will take care of those processes because of the physical proximity. Because Portugal is a very tiny country, as you can imagine, in 2-3 hours driving, we can be everywhere. Basically, and that's where we are.
Okay, fab. And a good time to introduce Michael. Based in the UK, Michael, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Smart?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Lucas. I'm a senior account manager with Smart Currency Exchange. Smart are a currency specialist based in London. We've been around for 20 years, and we help thousands of clients, primarily buying property overseas, but to help help them make an informed decision and help them manage their currency risk when buying property.
Lovely. Fab. Okay, so to all our viewers, this session will last about an hour. We'll be asking questions to each of our experts in turn, and then we'll get to your specific questions. So keep them coming in. I can see there's some already. Okay, let's start with Chris, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so what are the benefits of buying a new home in Portugal as opposed to a resale home?
Okay, so very good question. I mean, there's pluses and minuses for both. So if we're selling the new build, we either build it ourselves or we work with local developers, and you generally buy off plan. So you generally get a deep discount. Some of the deals we arranged just after COVID, clients were buying there for about $350, and now they're reselling for $550. So there was a really good upshift. And you end up with a new property. You can kind of customize it a little bit. You have the 5-year build guarantee, and some of the developers we work with actually stretch that out to 10 years as well. And it's nice, it's new, it's shiny. There can be some delays. So we've had a few developments where they've gone over by 3 or 4 months. So that's something definitely to bear in mind. There can be delays. and you don't get to use that property for 2 years. So you're kind of in and out of a rental. So there is a downside to it. And then with the resales, I mean, we have access to around about 500 resales across the Algarve. You're going in, you're buying a property that's established. It's kind of easier if you're not very good with your imagination. It's easy because you can buy it there and then. The downside, they can come with some issues. Like sometimes we get people who change their mind through the sales process and say, actually, we've decided we want to stay in Portugal. It's too nice. We don't want to leave. So that can be an issue. And it's not something that's very common, but it can happen. And then you're doing repairs. I mean, I generally prefer to sell new build because it's safer. The developer wants to sell. We only work with the best developers. They're handpicked, so they're safe. So yeah, I mean that's kind of the overview. I mean, personally, I've brought both. The house I live in was a bank repossession. We purchased that from the bank. That took a big refurbish. That took me 7 months to do the refurbish on that one. And then after that, I mean, I've owned that property for 6 years, and it's been an adventure, that one.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so what's our next question? What are the most popular areas for international buyers looking to buy property in Portugal?
So I would say for our location where we are, one of the places I love to sell, and my staff do, is Tavera. So it's like the Venice of the Algarve. So with Tavera, you can kind of come out the airport, turn towards Spain. You can be there in 25 minutes on the back road, 20 minutes on the new fast motorway, or 30 minutes on the train. And Tavera is like the Venice of the Algarve. So you can get around by boat still. There's about 30 churches, lots of traditional Portuguese restaurants. You've got the river in the centre of town. So Tavera is really nice. I would still look at the shoulder towns, which is Cabanas. It's a little bit more of that dream. You've got the island that you can get the boat across to. It's a little bit sleepier. It's only built on 3 stories high, so you get that Portuguese feel for it. There's some wonderful restaurants down there. The golf is only €45 a game. You've got a restaurant there. You get the fish, and they're just constantly bringing fish to you. And so Tavera is very nice, ticks the boxes, and Cabanas, and then Fuzeta. Fuzeta is this little sleepy town as well, like population maybe only 7,000 people. Again, you've got the islands to explore. It's very under-marketed, very underdeveloped. Only buildings on 1 story. You can have the day out at Armona Island. So it's a place I love to visit myself. And then kind of you come back towards the centre of the Algarve. And we sell property there. In my personal opinion, it's kind of, for lifestyle, it's great. It's where I choose to live. But for property investing, it's kind of at its day. There's a lot of developments. I mean, a developer came to our office the other day and went, "We're going to be selling 2-bed, 2 baths for €1 million." I'm just like, wow, it's kind of expensive. So it's beautiful. We've got the golf courses. We've got Villamora. We've got Val de Lobo, Quinta do Lago. It's a popular place, but it is getting that way with prices. Prices are getting high. So generally, we're selling a lot more in Lagos than Portimao. So Lagos and Portimao, they're kind of the market's kind of stretching out, and it's the way the progress of building where it's going. And we work with some amazing builders in both locations. I mean, right now people are buying in Portimao at only €290,000, new build, 2-bed, 2 baths. And then we've got some bank repossessions below 200,000, so which is really good value for money. And then Lagos, you're seeing some really nice developments come online. The developers are handpicked. They've got the best locations. And Lagos itself, I mean, you've got the 15th century walls around the city. Yeah. You've got the fishing marina. You've got the newer marina. So that's beautiful. You've got the Montjuic Mountains. So you've got nature. You've got the history. You've still got a couple of golf courses down there. So general overview of the Algarve is I would come out the airport head towards Lagos, or head towards the eastern Algarve, beyond that Spanish border. So you can kind of get over, get a tapas lunch, and then come back.
Lovely. That sounds like the dream. Okay. And for buyers looking to buy, how important is it that they already have an idea of where they want to buy property before they come and speak to you?
I mean, I would say, it's a good question. I would definitely say it's kind of better to be open-minded. So, and then come down, do one of our tours, so our VIP trips, spend 3 days with us, or maybe 3/4, and really get a feel for everything. So, I mean, some of my team, they've been with me for 16, 17 years. They know the Algarve inside out, like the back of their hand. And they can kind of, I mean, you'll have lots of consultations with us beforehand. We can start pinpointing what suits your criteria, your needs, your wants, your budget, your wish list, and really start building that up for you. And then we'll fly you over, do that important boots on the ground trip, and be seeing everything. So I wouldn't say it's too important. I mean, generally, as long as you like nice weather, low cost food, Portuguese, we can kind of fill in the gaps for you.
Lovely. That sounds great. You kind of touched on it there with the VIP trip. Is that kind of how you're able to help people with their viewing trip? So what does that involve?
So it involves really it's a business agreement. So we're saying you're going to book your flights and we'll assist you with that. And then we'll pick you up from the airport and we'll arrange all the hotel for you. And it's a hand-holding service. So we'll be able to help with fiscal numbers, bank accounts, the finance, touring you around the local area. I mean, if you're with someone for 3.5 days, you can kind of really get to know them, they get to know you. So yeah, it's a really successful service. We're not successful 100% of the time, but I would say 70% of the time. So yeah, that's a really good service. We've won some awards for that service, which I'm really proud of. So it's a great team of people.
It definitely sounds like you'd be able to get a better idea as an estate agent of what someone's actually after if they're able to spend a little bit more time with you. And like I always say to people on these webinars, you guys are the experts. So it really does pay to kind of use you and get the most out of you that they can, especially on these viewing trips.
Yeah, it's a good idea. And you'll meet lots of other people who've done it before. I mean, because we're one of the companies that's been there the longest, you can meet other clients. So there's a really nice couple called Joe and Terry down in Lagos. We regularly bump into them. Got some other clients down in Lagos. And because we've sold the developments, like the development at Dega, go for lunch near there in Munich Cafe in Lagos, you'll always see clients bumping into each other. So it's nice.
Oh, nice. Yeah, real community vibe.
Yes, for sure.
Okay. We have a question. What are the average property prices for, let's say, a 2-bedroom property, whether that be apartment or house?
So that's a great question. I would straight away jump in if we go to the east. So I'd say Cabarrus, the average is probably floating around 300,000 to 350,000 euros. I'd say Tavira itself, similar. It's a bit hard to generalise, but I would say in the east, 300 to 350 is kind of the going rate. That's due to build cost, land acquisition. So the east is probably the least cost area. Then Central Algarve, average prices reaching probably 750. It's not to say you can't get something for less, but just on average. And then in the west, in Lagos, I would say the average price is about 450. Portimao, slightly less, big city. That's actually the biggest city in the Algarve. I would say that's more like 350, 400 on average prices.
Yeah, I think I've seen some of your new development properties in Portimao. Am I right that they're by a racetrack?
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah. No, some of those are lovely. Okay, so as an estate agent, you obviously help a lot of people like make their dream of buying property in Portugal come true. So what would you say is like a potential pitfall that you see buyers kind of go through, and how can they avoid that?
I would say probably getting a little bit fixated on one place, so one thing. So I've seen some clients, remember one couple, and they wanted one development and they kind of missed out. And it's 15 years later and they still message and say, if anything comes for sale.
Oh, wow.
You just kind of gotta,
Yeah.
you know. So, yeah, I mean, there's not too many pitfalls. I mean, I've never had a bank repossession, so which I'm really, truly proud of. You know, if someone buys, and then as long as they wait 2 or 3 years, because you have the buying costs, so do bear in mind there's buying costs. But the running costs are super low. I mean, council tax on my house is €300 a year.
Wow.
You know, so gas and electric bills can be a bit high, but then it's ideally a good idea to get solar panels, so that keeps running costs low. I'd explore the finance. You know, mortgage rates as low as 3.4%. I mean, we've got banks offering us rates at Euribor plus 0%. So that's good. Finance up to 80%. So yeah, and then I would always say is think outside the box. I mean, with myself, when we purchased our property, we wanted to be able to pay the school fees. I never went to a private school, and I wanted to invest for my children. So we would leave the property every summer, go off to a different location. We generally take the children to Asia, because it was their low season, rent the property out. And that paid the finance on the house, which was about €1,000 a month, and it would pay the school fees, which were about €400 a month. So that worked really well. So I would always look at something, step back, analyse it, get the expert advice, but don't just think I've got to pay cash. Explore the financing option. I mean, if you can borrow money at 3.4%, and the Halifax in the UK is offering you 5.5%. Then that's a wise decision. So,
yeah, definitely. And how easy is it for international buyers to secure a mortgage in Portugal?
Relatively easy. So we have a success rate of about 97%. Again, it's something, I mean, especially if you're a business owner, you can preempt for. So I would get that consultation in nice and early. I mean, our company is simply Ideal Homes Mortgages. So, reach out by all means. We've got 4 mortgage brokers in the office. It's a simple process. It's a phone call. You'll get a rough answer there and then. Then it's the formal offer. Then we work with pretty much all the banks. There's about 9 different banks we work with. And then the banks start fighting with each other. So at the end, you can kind of negotiate a little bit. You can get the rate reduced. They might say would you like to take a credit card with us, a debit card, buy some shares in the bank? But yeah, you can always get the rate a little bit lower. That's probably the top tip.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. Some really great insight there. I'm going to come over to Joanna now. On a similar note, Joanna, coming off the back of talking about mortgages, how important is it that you open a bank account in Portugal if you're buying property?
Well, Rosie, thank you for the question. I feel nowadays that it's not something to go into in a rush. It is advisable to have a bank account here because you'll have, utility bills to pay every month, and you rather not think about it and have a direct debit running and just send 1 or twice a year a sum that will cover, those costs for the whole year. But, international transfers do work properly. During the purchase process, we receive funds from our clients into our client account. We manage all the payments. We represent the clients here. And sometimes they just came the first time, they visited a property, and then they went back to the UK, to their hometowns. And we took care of everything through our client account, and we ran all the payments. So There is a benefit of having, and we can assist opening bank accounts, recommending banks for that, even remotely sometimes. But it's not, it's key, definitely, if you want to relocate
Yeah, for sure.
and to move and immigrate to Portugal. That is important, and it will be part of the application. At some point, you'll be required to show a Portuguese bank statement. But it's in those cases.
Okay, fab. Thank you. And I'm sure you get this question a lot, so apologies. But it's recently come about that the Golden Visa Scheme investment in real estate in Portugal is no longer viable. So have you seen interest still there in the Golden Visa with the other routes?
The Golden Visa, so the real estate route for the Golden Visa was abolished because of the impact that these foreign investors caused in the housing market, whether we can agree or not with that. Now, what's left? We have a more financial design Golden Visa and corporate design Golden Visa. So there is still interest, but not for property buyers. As I think our audience is more looking into buying a property in Portugal, if they have the means to do an investment, a financial investment, whether in Portuguese investment funds that are that meet the requirements for Golden Visa purposes, or investing in a business, whether it's a new business or a running business, an existing business in Portugal, they can get the Golden Visa. Of course, they will always need accommodation in Portugal, so it's a plus if they want to buy their own properties. The Golden Visa does still have the benefit of requiring very short periods of stay in Portugal, and thus avoiding also some tax implications on staying longer.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I know a lot of people now are looking more at new build properties, off-plan properties. I think actually Chris deals with a lot of developments, which are truly lovely. Like he said, you don't have to deal with like any things that come with buying an old home. I mean, it's the same in the UK. So is there any tax advantages to buying new in Portugal?
Of buying new, no, not really tax advantages, at least no longer. There was some advantages where there was urban rehabilitation properties. That benefit was abolished very recently. But I would say a few tips on thinking when buying off plan. It is very good, as was saying, and Chris was explaining, to have a brand new property, to buy it off plan. You have risks of buying off plan, but you also have the pros, because you have a price increase or a value increase after construction, and you can make a good money if you decide to resell. The risks, I always prefer to be very honest with clients and treat them, as I say, as grown adults, and explain. You will be, the developers will be paying the construction with the future owner's money. So there is always a risk of bankruptcy, of the failure of the development itself. And usually it's common on off-plan purchases that up to sometimes 80% of the purchase price of the property is asked before the final deed. So before you are the official owner of that property. So until then, you are entitled to have that deal made. But of course, there are risks, and it's important to do due diligence on the developer, on the property and the project, and in have independent advice. I always tell the clients that the ones you pay are the ones who will look after you. So usually it's really important to have your own independent advisors.
Yeah, that's great. I think I might jump back to Chris, if that's okay. Chris, I know you work with a lot of developers. What can you tell our listeners about kind of the people that you promote? I assume we can trust them. They are all tried and tested, right?
Yes. I mean, this is so important to look into the history of the developer, do your due diligence. If you feel uncomfortable at any stage, don't do the deal. I mean, the lawyer has got your back 100%. Always use a lawyer. There's I just want to be clear with this. I mean, there is a way where you can buy without a lawyer. It's just we never recommend it. We always want that safety net of using the lawyer. Also, you can add in a bank guarantee, which is something the developers are a little bit like, oh, it costs me money. You have to do the paperwork. It does slow the sale down. But if a developer's not willing to do a bank guarantee and make your money safe, just walk away. Don't do the deal. Put some clauses in there as well. If you're worried about getting finance, let's speak about it. Put a clause in there subject to a certain level of finance. Don't be afraid to ask the difficult questions. Always ask if the company's got a real estate license, if they've got an office, how long they've been in business, who they are, what they do. Make sure the developer's got an office. Insist on going to that office. And from my experience, being in the market for a long time, the little Portuguese developers, they're gems. Like one of the developers we work with, they purchased the land back in the 60s. So, one of the developer deals I did about 2 years ago, we were selling our properties at 477,000 euros, very close, almost on the beach. A big, well-known developer next door selling theirs for 630. Our developer didn't need the land price included. And we sold all them units, 79 units, in less than an hour. So the demand was so big. And developers happy, the clients are happy, the units are now gone up in value, is probably halfway through finishing them. That's what you want to look out for, is some little local builders. They will look after you. They'll take you back. Some of them, the one who we've got in Cabanas in Tavera, he takes people back to his house. They sit. He's a great guy, Marcelino. I've been working with him since my son was born. My son's 15 now. So,
wow, lovely.
Yeah.
As
One thing, sorry, Rosie. One important thing that Chris also mentioned minutes ago was the guarantee. New properties do have a builder's guarantee. It's a legal guarantee, and it's advisable. Sometimes the difficulties is enforcing this guarantee. So having a builder that it's on the market for many years and will continue, give you the assurance that, okay, if there is anything wrong, I know this person, this entity, this developer will be there to support me. Unfortunately, there are many cases where builders just went ghost. And then we have to face all the court actions and litigations on that.
Yeah. See, a lot of people might not know this. Your Overseas Home has been around for about 20 years now as part of the Overseas Guides company. And we were kind of built because our CEO's business partner, her parents bought a property and they were kind of misled in the exact instance that we're all trying to avoid. And they lost a lot of money. So that's exactly why we're here today, really, to kind of connect our listeners, our clients, really, with trusted services like yourselves. Okay. On a similar note, I think Chris mentioned adding clauses to your contracts. How easy is that, Joanna?
Well, it depends a lot on the other party and on your lawyers. But I would say that it's really, really important to have those, as we started, all the implications that on your client's specific circumstances will have on the deal, whether there is financing, and there are some things that the counterpart will ask for or will refuse, which we can accept. We have some flexibility. There are others that we cannot accept at all, and there are really, really red flags. The bank guarantee that Chris was mentioning is really a plus, that or an escrow account. But of course, the builders will want, the developers will need the deposit amounts to finance the construction. So escrows are not so very, very welcomed because they will need to use that money. Bank guarantees will increase the costs And at last, who pays the cost is always the clients. But it gives definitely security and safety to the transaction. It's difficult for lower amounts, so lower investments, because of course the gain it's not worth to pay for a bank guarantee. To have some contractual agreements to enforce this guarantee that I was referring is also very welcomed, and I always prefer to have them also included in the contracts, because then it's not just a law as a source of their obligation, it's also a contract, and legally that is more robust in terms of our cases if we need them. It will depend also, and this is a supply demand rule on how the demand for properties and how many people are interested, because as you will understand, a developer that has a buyer who just accepts a very simple contract will probably prefer to sell that property to that buyer and not to a buyer that wants to have more assurances and increased costs like guarantees, insurances, etc. So sometimes it's not that we do not push for those guarantees to be there in those clauses, but if the client really wants the property, those clauses sometimes can be deal breakers.
Yeah, of course.
Something to bear in mind.
Okay, we've had a few questions about the long stay visa alternatives. I mean, alternatives? That's not what I mean. Just long stay visas. So I know there's the D7. Can you talk us through that?
Sure. Yes. So we opposite to the golden visa, where you have very minimum periods of stay, and as I said, it's very rare and narrowed now. You have what we call the traditional residence visas, and you have different routes to obtain a residence permit in Portugal. The D7 is one of those routes and is a visa designed for people in a retirement scheme already, or people living from what we call passive income. Let's say this. What is passive income? They are not active workers. They do receive interest, dividends, royalties, pensions, or they already have a nice saved amount of money that is enough for them to live in a different country and to have means of resources, means of subsistence to stay here in a country where, as Chris was mentioning, the life cost, it's not so expensive. So the minimums are very tolerable, let's say. They are easy to reach to get a D7, and they will then give you access to come to Portugal. You have 4 months once the visa is issued, and then you have the right to enter in the country twice. You have 2 entries included, and then you'll have your meeting to get your first residence permit, your temporary residence permit, which will be valid for 2 years. Okay. What are the implications of having a D7, of moving to Portugal, of getting this permit? The law requires, and of course, this is understandable, because if you are applying for a residence permit, it's because you want to become a Portuguese resident. You want to stay here the majority of your time. So that is what the law will ask you for. You have to stay in the country, you have to live here, you have to have your house here. You can live, you can travel, you can go out to visit family or to support a sick relative if needed. But overall, during these 2 years, you can live the country for 6 consecutive months or 8 interpolated months, so non-consecutive.
With gaps, yeah.
Gaps. 2 months here, 1 month there, 8 in total, which means that after, if you count, you'll spend the majority of your time here and you'll become a Portuguese tax resident. You have to pay your taxes in Portugal. You cannot pick. You cannot be resident for one purpose and non-resident for another purpose, namely to go to your pocket and pay your taxes. So there are some tax benefits. You've probably heard about the NHR and all the end that is this transitional period that is now last in place until the end of this year. Other arrangements. But at the end of the day, Portugal will have the power to tax your income worldwide. There are ways to avoid double taxation, okay? Please do not think that you'll be paying twice in the UK and in Portugal, or in the US and in Portugal. There are international agreements to avoid double taxation.
Okay, and with the D7, you mentioned it's for a passive income. So does that mean that you can't work on that visa?
You can work.
Oh, you can?
So it means you are applying the visas, are the routes. Let's say you have different roads to go to Rome, okay? So here you have different roads to go to Portugal. And the D7 is the road where you show that you can afford to be in Portugal. Okay. You will not be seeking, state money, etc. You can support yourself, pay your bills, pay your accommodation. You have a place to stay, and you can live here because you receive rentals. I forgot to mention this. This is also a passive income. You have a property rented, and many clients of ours have a property they bought, which they rent. They get some money out of it, and they have the property where they live. So they can make and have the best of both scenarios. They can have rentals from their original countries of residence. They decided not to sell their places, but to rent them out. So they will have income also coming from that. And it means you show that you have passive income enough to live here. Once you are here and you have a residence permit, you are allowed to work. Okay. Mm-hmm. You cannot work without a residence permit, whether it's a work permit or a different permit. If you come here only to work, you have specific permits for that.
Yeah. Okay. Fabulous. Thank you, Joanna. And very last but not least, Michael, you've been very patient with us. So let's get to our currency question. Obviously, when you're buying a property abroad, you might be dealing with another currency. So if I would be doing pound to euro. Why is it that I can't? I mean, I probably could, but why wouldn't I want to do a direct bank transfer to buy a property in Portugal?
Yeah, so you're right. So you could use the bank, and I guess on instinct, you might think of that as your first option, as they're familiar. Mm-hmm. But the disadvantage of using the banks, the first key one that most people would be interested in, is the cost difference. Banks tend to be far more expensive to send currency overseas, from having less competitive exchange rates compared to where the current market rate is, and also with fees both on actually sending the money and conversions as well. So overall, much less competitive in that sense. Not to mention as well, companies like ours, currency specialists, we know our entire job is revolved around the movement of your money into another currency. So we are there to guide you on how the process works, help you make an informed decision once you have, are further down the process. If you were to just go into your high street bank and say that you wanted to send money abroad, that person that you're speaking to likely won't have much experience in and around foreign currency. They'll be able to probably pull up on their computer an exchange rate to buy your euros or whatever it may be for you. But really, that's about the limit of what they will be able to specialize in and how they can guide you going forwards.
No, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. I know a few times I've bought the odd coffee, when on holiday on my card, and you don't really realize till you get back that they do charge you that little difference. But I can imagine probably not the best idea for a property.
Yeah, it definitely
sums, right? My God.
Yeah, adds up very quickly on a larger amount.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so when people are buying property, let's say in Portugal, how far out from, wanting to put the money down would you recommend they contact you at Smart Currency?
In all honesty, I wouldn't say there's any time that's too early to start having a conversation about it. I mean, the majority of clients that I speak to are looking to buy within 18 months as an absolute maximum. I think personally that, as I said, there's no time where it's too early. Obviously, there is a lot of steps to the process in buying a property abroad, currency exchange being a very important one of them. And there's it's never a bad time to just understand a bit more about how the process will work, get guidance on, what the, speak to me so I can understand, what your plans are, what your budget might be, any bit of information that allows me to work out how best I can assist you. The earlier the better, really. So, if you're thinking about doing this any time in the near future, even if it's from a case of you've just sat down and started Googling and thought, okay, I might do this in the future, it might just be a plan, have a chat with us. I think there's no harm at all in just getting more information.
No, definitely. That sounds great. Thank you. And obviously, the currency markets move every minute of every day. Do you offer any services that allow buyers to kind of benefit from a good rate? So I'm pretty sure the pound's quite good at the moment. So how would I go about securing that?
Yeah, so we have a suite of solutions that are available, and depending on your situation, different ones will be more advantageous to you. You're right, the sterling euro rate, we're currently hovering around a 4-month high, so the best the rate's been since September, and if you go back even further, we're generally very, very in a good position. You have options to buy the currency right now and pay for it right now. That's what we call buying on spot. And then you also have options to secure currency for dates in the future. So if you're aware of currency exchange at all, you may have heard of something called a forward contract, and that's where you can agree with us to buy currency for a date in the future. You agree the amount you want to buy and the exchange rate that you'll be exchanging at, and you can lock in the exchange rate without having to completely pay for that transaction. Generally, to do this, we ask for roughly a 5% deposit. So if you know that you have a property purchase to pay for, especially if you are as far along as having your offer accepted and you've committed to a purchase, you can come to us and look to buy the currency ahead of time, and so you know exactly what the cost in pounds will be before you ultimately need to pay for it.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. And what would happen if the rate moves the opposite way, if you've already got a forward contract?
So any currency that you agree to buy with us, the reason we're able to secure the rate is because we buy it up front for you. So if you do agree to buy any currency at the time, you are generally committed from that point. If you are of the mind that you think, okay, I don't want to secure my whole exposure, and miss out if the market moves in my favour, we have the options to, we call it a part hedge, where you can commit to a portion of your, whatever you need to pay down the line. So if you are of the mind that you like to take a bit of a gamble and see if the market will move in your favour, you can do that. So you've got some money spare to wait and see how the rate moves, and potentially take advantage if it goes up. Depending on the kind of person you maybe are more or less risk averse. There's options for however you want to play it. So it's not just a case of buy it all now or buy it all later. And it's something that we can discuss with you when we're finding out more about your plans and can advise accordingly.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. So when you say part hedge, let's say I'm buying a property for 200 euros, if only 200,000 euros. That made me laugh. So let's say if I wanted to lock in half of that amount and then kind of not gamble, but like leave that other 100 exposed. Is that what you mean?
Exactly, yeah. If that's the way you wanted to play it, if you didn't want to lock up all £200,000 worth or 200,000 euros worth of currency in one go, you could. I mean, we do use the phrase gamble because at the end of the day, the currency markets, we can we monitor them. We specialize in sort of knowing what affects them, what can cause volatility. But ultimately, no one truly knows exactly where the markets will move. If people did, they'd be very, very wealthy, and would be I'd be talking to you from a beach rather than sat here in my office. So that's why we say gambling, because especially when it comes to buying property overseas, your intention is to buy property, not to make money on the currency markets. So if you're in a position where you have committed to a purchase, we often have a conversation around, okay, you are buying a property overseas now. Is it not wiser now to have certainty in what the costs are going to be in pounds, rather than having really no idea what you're going to be paying for a property in several months' time?
Okay, fab. So it really gives you that kind of security. And I suppose gamble is the right word. You are gambling with your savings, really. So it pays to know someone who's going to help you with that. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to whiz through some questions. This is open floor, so, grab it, take it if you know the answer. Okay, so Glynis, I think I've said that right, lives in France and has carte de séjour as well as a British passport. What's the best way to get a visa for Portugal? Is there an easy way since we already have a carte de séjour?
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I forgot the name.
Eunice.
Dennis?
Yeah,
Dennis.
Glennis.
Glennis, sorry. The visa process will always start from the country of residency, in this case from France. We've experienced to work with the Portuguese embassy in Paris very recently, and it worked really well for a client of us. So if the client doesn't have an EU passport, he will always need a visa, and will start from the country where the person is at the moment. So I would say that is the route.
Yeah. Thank you. Chris, we've had a few questions asking whether you're able to help people find property in the Porto area and northern Portugal.
Yeah, so we can definitely help with that. So, we've got a network of agents. So it wouldn't be personally my team on the ground. Mm-hmm. So we have a chosen network of agents. So we would work and liaise with them. They would still get access to all the services, just not the rentals. So, like the mortgages and all the good advice. And still use Michael for the currency exchange, which is great service. So definitely.
Fab, thank you. And one for Michael. Dusan is asking, is it possible to send retirement money from Slovakia and the UK to an account in Portugal? So, usually for the international transfer.
Yeah, absolutely. We can facilitate payments to and from most countries. Obviously, as long as there is a currency exchange occurring. If I'm not sure what currency you hold in Slovakia, but as long as there was some sort of conversion taking place, then we can facilitate that. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And would that money be taxed in Portugal, Joanna? No.
Just because you're sending money here, it won't be taxed immediately, nor at the entrance. It will be cut right when it arrives in Portugal. No, unless we are talking about if it's not savings. If you live in Portugal and your income comes from abroad, as I explained, Portugal will have power to tax you, to tax your income worldwide, and then we will have to see how and up to which amount, and if there are any double taxation, any ways to avoid double taxation. And when I say double taxation, is taxation in the country of source, imagine from the UK or Slovakia, now we're saying, and Portugal. So we always want to avoid the same income to be taxed twice, okay? If there is 30 seconds, I would like to add two important ideas before going on to the next question, Rosie, which is, I was thinking about which questions are more common from clients on their first-time buyers in Portugal and coming to our offices. Joanna, how much in total should I budget for costs? Including legal fees, taxes, notaries, bank charges, etc. The worst case scenario, and on average, we always advise a client to budget 10% of the purchase price of the property they are looking for. Okay, up to 10%. This is the worst case scenario. On those 10% will fall everything, and there will be money left. Okay, so this is the worst case scenario. Another important aspect, which have led sometimes to very bad feelings of many clients buying here without proper advice, is in Portugal, and the Portuguese law is designed in a way that a deposit that is paid by a promissory buyer, in a contract, which we call a promissory note or a promissory agreement of purchase and sale of a property, is, as a rule, that doesn't mean that the parties cannot change this or amend it slightly, non-refundable. Okay, so we've had clients, because they were selling their properties abroad, because they were expecting a payment that would be due in a few months before completion, and that payment didn't exist. So they lost a significant amount. Like in the UK, which I understand a buyer can pull out to a very late stage of the process, in Portugal, once you sign a promissory note and you pay a deposit, and usually a deposit, Chris can also elucidate on this from his experience, usually a deposit is never below 10%. Very, very rare. Or not often 20, sometimes 30. And if we are talking about off-plan purchases, this can go up to 80%, in before completion. So bear this in mind, please, okay, when jumping into a deal. Without bearing this in mind is really risky. Okay, so those are the two remarks I would like to add before I forgot.
No, it's a good one to mention. We do often get that question, so it's good to consider it in your budgeting.
Yeah.
Okay. I will mention we are getting a lot of questions just now, so we can run over for like 5 minutes, and then if we don't get around to your question, they will be forwarded to our experts here, and we will be emailing you with the link to watch a recording of this seminar, as well as their contact details. So don't worry, you'll be supplied with everything. Okay, next question is from Anita. This might be Chris and Joanna. We are buying a property with the potential to build on the land that goes with it. Can we buy through a UK company, which we will develop the land later on?
Definitely. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Lovely, quick answer.
That's very common. Yeah.
I'd love to reach out to that person and find out what they're building, see if I can offer any assistance, any advice. I've been building myself for some years, so if I can help in any way, let me know.
Lovely, thanks, Chris. Okay. Dusan is asking, can you please explain the difference between plot and rustic plot? Because we have a plan to buy plot and build on, put on a tiny house or mobile home.
Mobile home, yes. Okay. So are very famous at the moment. Chris, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I mean, thank you. So I've got quite a bit of experience with this. So 2 years ago, I purchased a property to fix up with a friend of mine. That was 15,000 square meters, but only 250 square meters of the land was non-rustic. It was habitation. So the bank valuation came in kind of low. So I purchased the property for 320. We went through the process of financing it, and at the last minute, the bank only lent me 70% of the purchase price instead of 80%. So there was this mad rush to put more money into the deal due to it being rustic land. Then we refurbished the property, and I sold this on to another friend of mine, and they rent the property out. It's on our rentals website. So it can be done. Just be a little bit more cautious if you're purchasing a property. And then when it comes to putting a mobile home on a piece of land, that can be a nightmare in itself. That can have its pitfalls, its downfalls. There's no financing usually available. You're in a bit of a grey area. You never want to upset your neighbours because that can cause problems. And then when you come to sell it on, you have to remember it is a piece of land. It's not that. I mean, I've been offered some pieces of land before in the past from €6,000, and I've turned these down because there's not a lot you can do with it. It's nice to own land, and land's a great investment, But I've known people wait for planning permission for 20 years and it's not come through. And the Portuguese government are very strict on what they do with planning permission. My developers sometimes wait 5 years and they sit back, and you get other developers coming in, perhaps from Ireland, the UK or Spain. I mean, some of the Spanish developers come in and they're super aggressive and they go, we want planning permission in 12 months. And it's like, it just doesn't happen. Yeah. So that's my experience of that.
Yeah, I think
Rosie, let's hope, as I was saying to you before we started, let's hope there is a new regulation now coming into that was recently approved that will speed up the licensing process and also ease and reduce bureaucracy in Portugal. So in principle, it will be quicker, and we are always all very excited to know, to see in practice this happening, because many of our clients, 90% of our clients are foreign investors, and it's very difficult to explain how come it takes so long to get permission and then a habitation license, which will no longer be required in the majority of the cases. But I will answer the question, which was the difference between a plot and a rustic plot. Right?
Good memory.
So you have two types of land, basically. You have rustic and urban land. And as Chris was saying, in a plot, you need to look in detail into the regulations and the planning legal framework applicable in the area where that plot is located, to understand whether you have a single urban plot, a construction plot where you can build, and what can you build, and up to which size of property can you build, one property, two properties, 2 floors, basement or not, to know exactly what you can do. And if all that land, or if part of that land is also rustic land, and if rustic land, whether it is in a protected area, for example, natural resources like rivers or fountains, or if it's an agricultural area. So there are very different types, urban and rustic, but then in the rustic we have another set of different kinds of property. Just bear in mind that even a mobile home or a caravan or wherever you want to put in there, if you will need water, sewage, connections, electricity, you need to have an urban land. It's think like this: you are just changing the materials or construction, let's say between commas, because you are putting a property there. You need these connections to live there, so you need to follow the rules. It's not because you are using a mobile home that you will be out of the rules. Okay. In fact, the benefit is just, from what I've understood from other projects, it's the cost of the construction. Okay. Aside from that, it's like a works contract and a construction.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, Joanna. Okay, I've got one more question for Michael. This is from John. John's asking, what's the best way of ensuring the best sterling to euro conversion rate at specific stage payments on a new build?
Yeah, sure. So I touched on it briefly earlier. If you've got a new build being made that you know you're going to have to pay for in stages, then the advantage of being able to lock the exchange rate in ahead of time is really strong. So if you had an idea of how much you have to pay at each stage and when that stage will be, you can agree to buy that specific amount of currency ahead of time. And so, as I touched on before, you'll agree to the amount you're buying, the exchange rate that we can offer you, and so therefore the cost in sterling. And then we made a 5% deposit for each one, just 5% of whatever you're planning to lock in. And so that way, each stage, as you become aware of it and know what you need to pay, you can lock that in, and then you know exactly what the costs are for each stage that you're paying for, and you sort of have that that comfort that you're that then covered, and you know exactly what the rate is.
Yeah, Oh no, that's great. Thank you. Okay, I think that's about all we've got time for now. Thank you so much for sticking with us. I think we've pretty much had the same group of people since we started, so that's great. Thank you to all our experts. You've shared some really insightful tips and advice today. We do strongly recommend that you get in touch with Chris, Joanna, and Michael to discuss your requirements in detail. We will be in touch with their details shortly, no later than midday tomorrow, when we'll also share a recording of this seminar if you need to rewatch anything. Before we finish, I would like to remind you to register for our virtual event, where you can speak to all of these experts and their teams. You can arrange consultations, speak to them one-on-one. It's a really great place to kind of get all of that information. And if you have time, please feel free to leave us a review on Trustpilot if you did find this webinar helpful. So thank you to all of our speakers, Chris, Joanna, Michael. It's been lovely speaking with you. And have a lovely evening, everyone.
Thank you, Rosie. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, guys.